with season 9 of The Walking Dead, seeing that Alexandria is fully rebuilt and full of plenty of food they've been growing. Hey, so I guess that future clip that Rick kept thinking about really did happen. And now we're gonna get more of a future leader Rick, because now that there's peace, he's not as violent as he used to be. So just saying that, don't think he's gonna put on that murder jacket anytime soon. But as Alexandria is doing pretty well, it seems like the Sanctuary is doing kinda okay, as their crops are dried out and Eugene's trying to just run the place. And so is Tara. As we see it, they actually mapped out the places. They got routes now, to find each other easier. And of course, Jesus still beating the crap out of walkers, while Aaron's grew a whole entire beard. Like, what? But since they all have to travel across the bridge as Daryl goes by it, we see that their bridge isn't doing too well. While it seems like Rick and Michonne are on a mission now. Wait, and everyone else. And as we remember, Gabriel actually did get his eyesight back, but it looks like he only got it back in one eye. But we're all wondering, why is there a whole entire squad here? And that's because of this woman right here, which of course is Jadis, as she actually worked here. But while everybody admires the place, we see they better watch their step, as behind the glass is a bunch of walkers under them. But it seems like they can all walk over it, and even a walker falls on it and still doesn't break it. So our team ends up checking the place out to see nothing, until Rick opens one of these drawers to see a bunch of seeds, which is going to help a lot with all the colonies, especially the Saviors. While we see that our group's all surviving, but they're not all together now. Carol's been with King Ezekiel at the Kingdom, Maggie got voted president at Hilltop, and Michonne and Rick have been running Alexandria. But our team isn't done, as they also found a carriage, and we're gonna see how this goes. So our team slowly ends up leading the carriage down, so ends up going on the glass pretty well. But they can't be too fast with it, because if they go down the middle, they all die. But they successfully end up getting the carriage, and now they gotta get going until the glass starts to shatter. So Rick tells everyone to run, and King Ezekiel falls down, but somehow they end up getting him pulled out with no bites at all. And that's where we see that Carol's not just living with the king, they're actually also dating. I'm gonna be honest, I've never seen this coming. But as her team ended up getting all the seeds in the carriage, it's time for everybody to go home. And King Ezekiel even tries to ask Carol to marry him, which she says, 1, no, not after you just died almost, and 2, she's not getting married on a horse. But as we see the team get stopped, we end up seeing that the bridge got taken down. So yeah, what a plan to get around everywhere. So Rick tells all of his people that it's going to take a long time to get home, so everyone's going to end up staying at Hilltop or the Saviors. But as they're still trying to take the carriage, they don't have time, as there's a bunch of walkers coming, so they all end up having to leave. But this little kid goes to try to save a horse, gets bit, and gets kicked by the horse. And since he got bit and kicked so hard, he ends up dying faster, and the kid ends up dying, which we can see that is one of Maggie's people. And the dad and mom aren't too happy, so they blame Maggie for killing their kid, and that she needs to start putting Hilltop first since she's the president. And even tells her why are they even helping the Saviors, which we can see in Maggie's face, she doesn't want to help them anyways. So the mom and dad have a burial, as Maggie has to stay home and not go, while we see that Gregory tries to talk to him. But that's where Rick ends up showing up to the Sanctuary, telling them that they got seeds for him. And Rick asks Eugene how it's going, and Eugene says it's going pretty well, besides a couple of eyes looking at him in different ways. As in, some of the Saviors still want to be the Saviors. And back with Gregory, that's where he stands up and tells them that their kid was a fighter, but Maggie shouldn't have sent him out. Then we see back with Rick as he explains to him that he's giving him the seeds. The good Saviors end up thanking him and even applauding him, but it looks like Daryl does not care about that. So they go and have a little bro talk, and that's where Daryl tells Rick that he doesn't want to lead these people anymore, which I can totally understand. He was held captive here listening to the same song for about 4 days. But Rick just says that we're gonna have to make it all work. And that's where Daryl says there really ain't no us anymore, because remember, they haven't lived or seen each other for a good minute. While Gregory's trying to, manipulate to make Maggie look bad and try to get his place back to president. While Rick's about to get ready for sleep, he ends up telling Michonne he has an idea, because Daryl's not happy and he knows that the plan's going to go wrong somehow, so he's going to try to fix the bridge. While back at Hilltop, Gregory ends up telling Maggie that somebody defaced Glenn's grave. So she ends up going to Glenn's grave with their baby Herschel, and ends up getting smacked by somebody in a black hoodie. And as Enid tries to get in too, he ends up smacking her, hitting her head on a brick, knocking her out. But the man in the black hoodie ended up being the dad of the kid that Maggie got killed. The one that Gregory was trying to talk to. Yeah, it looks like Gregory sent him to try to kill her, While it looks like King Ezekiel's actually going back to the kingdom, but Carol's staying with the Saviors. But for some reason, Rick and Michonne end up showing up to Hilltop, which Daryl just got to. And that's where Rick ends up seeing a little bit more of Herschel. But of course he didn't come for the baby, he has a preposition. Hilltop is doing better than all of them in crops right now. So he's basically asking if they can have more seeds for the Saviors so they can get things running back. And, fix the bridge. But Maggie says the only way she's going to give them crops is if they do most of the labor for the bridge. But Rick's kind of like, those are still people. But Maggie says that she don't care, the only reason they're alive is because they surrendered. But speaking of that problem solved in the morning, we got a problem to solve tonight. Gregory tried to kill Maggie, so he's going to be sentenced with death. Just for now on, so everyone knows how it's going to be. So yeah, maybe our team split up isn't too good for them. And we're back with episode 2. So we start off as seeing Rick talking to Negan. And apparently he hasn't really talked to him lately, so now he's going to talk to him about how his day's been. It seems like all of the group ended up gathering together to make this bridge. And hopefully everything can go well. Because it's not about surviving now, it's about the future. The new beginning. And since they're fixing the bridge, of course, King Ezekiel and Carol are both here. And Eugene's trying to be in case of all the alarms and bombs are going to set to make sure the walkers don't come their way. Because we all remember how Rosita knows those things about bombs. But as Sadiq's trying to teach Enid how to do basic surgery, Rick ends up telling Sadiq that there's a stomach bug going around and he needs to get back to Hilltop. And that's where Eugene says that they need more help, but Rick says Michonne's on it. And she ends up arriving to Hilltop as she's trying to talk to Maggie. She tells her that they need those seeds really bad, but apparently the Saviors that are supposed to give her ethanol for lawnmowers didn't bring it, and if they don't bring her the ethanol, then she's not giving them free food. And she tells her since Alexandria is pretty far, she could stay a night here. While back on the bridge, Daryl and Aaron have a good conversation. Henry ends up playing water boys. He gives everybody 1 cup of water, but this dude ends up taking more than just 1 cup. So he literally takes the thing from the kid and literally starts drinking it. So the kid puts him in his place. And then the dude literally tries to come at the kid, but Daryl stops him. So the dude tries to hit Daryl, misses. Daryl hits him, knocking him into sand. That's where he gets the douchebag move to throw sand in Daryl's eyes and end up tackling him. And that's when Rick and Eugene finally show up to the bridge. And he has to get out there and stop everyone from fighting. And Daryl says that they need punishment, but Rick says there's only going to be 3 more days. And that eventually they're going to fall on our team. But Daryl says it doesn't matter how many of them get on their team because some of them still won't. But Rick just says they got to keep together and then they'll all figure out that they're on the same side. And that's where Daryl asks Rick if they're on the same side. Yeah, it seems like these two still aren't butting heads. But back with the mom of the kid that died. She wants to see her husband, as remember he dressed up in a black hoodie and tried to kill Maggie. But right now Maggie says that she can't see him yet. And we see at the bridge base that Gabriel and Jade are together. While Maggie says that she wants to talk to Georgie again. And that's where Jesus asks if she wants to go with them. But she says no, she was just reading all the old notes. But Maggie does eventually let the wife see her husband. And we see after all that he's really not that bad of a person. But a bunch of sound's been going on, so a bunch of walkers are on their way. While the husband explains that he used to be a really bad drunk to his wife and she ended up staying with him no matter what. He stopped drinking, but that's when Gregory ended up giving him a drink, making him go crazy. While Tara ends up alarming Rick that there's a horde coming, so it's time to set off the alarms. But it seems like some of them are having issues, and it looks like some of the Saviors are actually walking off. And that's where Tara tells Rick that the squad that hasn't done it yet is Daryl's and Aaron's. So while they're all actually getting all these big logs, a bunch of walkers end up showing up. So the Saviors holding the log end up dropping it as Aaron ends up falling under it. So Daryl runs over, screams at the Saviors and tells them to help him now, because it looks like the logs got Aaron's arm. They do end up getting Aaron out, but let me tell you, his arm does not look good. While Rick and them make their way over there as fast as possible, and he even gets a good shot in, dropping some logs straight on some walkers. Nice kills. But since Rick sent Sadiq home, Enid's the only one that's going to be able to deal with Aaron. And Enid ends up telling Aaron that he's lost too much flesh and that they're going to have to cut off his wound. Which means Aaron's going to lose his arm, so Daryl goes to see who messed up the signal. And of course it had to be this dude. But Daryl literally starts to beat the living crap out of him. And as he about goes too far, Carol has to stop him this time. While it seems like Maggie's starting to go a little bit on Michonne's side, but they're going to figure out a little bit more on the rules as they go through. because Maggie still has that feeling that some people aren't redeemable. While at night, this dude tries to come up to Rick and tells him that he needs to get Daryl on a leash. So that's where Rick tells him that he knows douchebags like him because he's a cop. And if he don't leave by morning, stitches aren't going to fix what he does to him. Alright, Rick's still there. Well, it looks like Aaron didn't make it through the pain, so he's going to be okay. But it's funny how he started to look like Rick from the comics. While Rick takes in this campfire, which is also crazy, because the last time he had a little campfire, a bunch of walkers took it over. And the crazy part about it is the only people from the original group is Carol, Rick, and Daryl. And then we cut back to Rick talking to Negan as this whole time he's been telling him the story. But Negan doesn't care how this place rises because he knows it'll fall and he's going to take it over, which hopefully it never comes to. But as Jadis is being a lookout, one night she ends up seeing that helicopter flying around. What are those helicopter people doing? So back with the Saviors that ended up walking off, none of them made it home. So as the dude that Rick ended up sending home goes his way, he meets somebody apparently that he knows but still ends up attacking him. And we're back with episode 3 on a murder case. So we start out as this place with a bunch of signs on the floor and as a bunch of walkers walk in it. And as we see a bunch of walkers eating on a dude, we end up seeing it's the dude from the end of the last episode, with a marking saying final warning. So yeah, someone's killing off the Saviors. While Rick and Michonne thinks everything's pretty okay as they're gonna go to Hilltop, while Maggie and one of the other guys are on their way to take the Saviors some food. Speaking of the Saviors, they end up coming out of the grass out of nowhere, and this dude named Mud always tries to overstep. And the reason that they are is because they think that Maggie's the one killing them. But she's actually not, as she's trying to get them food. While Rick and Michonne actually spend some good time with Judith. But of course they don't get to leave Alexandria before something bad happens. And that's where this dude ends up telling them that they found the body of one of the dead Saviors. So of course everyone's rioting now. It seems like all of the Saviors are trying to fight anybody from the Alexandria Oceanside or any of the other sides. But as Mud tries to overstep once again, Carol and all the others end up pulling out guns since they took the Saviors. But of course it doesn't come down to that as Rick stops everybody. And he says he will find a way to figure out what happened. So Rick goes up to Gabriel and tells him that he needs to just watch Jadis because he wants everybody to be watched. Because right now Rick trusts Gabriel a lot. And this one Savior that's been helping the whole time asks for a couple guns because they just want to be safe. But Rick says if they stay and help, then they'll figure something out. And that's where Rick goes to his first suspect, Daryl. And the only reason he goes up to Daryl is because he ended up saying that the wound on the dude is actually an arrow. But Daryl said it wasn't him as he would have killed him out in plain sight. But Daryl says whoever's doing this is right because bringing all these people together wasn't going to work. But you know, Rick is still about people and everybody matters. So it looks like Maggie and Cindy are looking out for any of the walkers of the dead Saviors. While Cindy says that she actually used to live somewhere near here. Which of course a nearby house is ran over by walkers. But as they get attacked by a lot of walkers, Rick and them come to help. And as they go farther in the woods, Cindy ends up seeing one of her friends, Beatrice, as apparently she got knocked out and a rock got taken. But if they don't figure out who's killing off all these Saviors, the Saviors will be gone and not help with the bridge. And even Carol somewhat agrees with Rick as it's not either of their choices, they just have to have everyone to live. Because Rick said back then he really did want to kill all of the Saviors. But that's where Rick learned that they need to build life, not take it. While now it looks like Maggie and Daryl are out on the lookout. And with one little clue of an arrowhead, Maggie and Daryl end up putting their clues together. While for some reason Jadis went back to the trash place and actually goes to one of her safes and gets out a random walkie-talkie and says to them that she's seen them last night, which is the helicopter people. But the only thing they say is, does she have an A or a B? And she ends up saying no, but she can make her worth. And she just asked how, and they just said that she needs to get an A or a B. Which Gabriel here is which I'd probably be concerned to. And that's where Gabriel ends up figuring out that the only reason Jess has been a part of Rick's group is basically she was going to sell them all to these people so she can gain a way into their group. We'll learn more about that later. But as Carol and Rick are out, it looks like some of the Saviors try to take them hostage. But of course it's Carol and Rick, so you know they're going to be able to get out of it. And you remember how this episode started with this gate? Yes, because this is the place that Oceanside lived before. Which means, yes, Cindy's been killing all the Saviors off. Because they killed all of their men. Just because Rick said that they can surrender doesn't mean that they wanted it. But at first Cindy said she wasn't going to do this until she seen Maggie hang Gregory. So they want to kill Rot for the last one. Because she's the one that killed Cindy's brother. You remember how they said they shot an 11-year-old? Yeah, that's who. So as Arat begs for her life, Daryl and Maggie literally turn the other way. So Cindy and her people ended up killing Arat. And as they figure out that Arat's gone, all of the Saviors are gone and they're not helping. Well, it looks like Maggie and Daryl are done going Rick's way. So now it's time for them to go visit Negan. And we're back with episode 4, seeing Michonne and Rick. As we see in Alexandria, they ain't gotta do too much as they get to sleep and wake up every morning with literally no problems. Well, you still got normal people yelling at each other. But at night, she still goes out and kills zombies just like the old Michonne from season 3. Yeah, let's be honest, Michonne's pretty cool still, but season 3 Michonne was crazy. But one night, she almost gets taken out by a zombie. She can't pick up her sword, so she ends up grabbing a bat and beating the crap out of the zombie. But she ends up figuring out that's Negan's bat, so she just leaves it where it was. It's probably just gonna sink into that mud. While Maggie's telling Jesus that she's on her way to Alexandria to do what she needs to do. So we're gonna see how that goes. And now, since it's been raining a lot, we got a bunch of water and the bridge isn't fully complete. Eugene says in a couple of days that bridge will no longer be there. So it looks like we're gonna have to find a way. So Rick ends up asking Carol what to do. And that's where Carol says she's taking the kingdom back home. And that honestly, they just need to let the Saviors do their own lives. Which at this moment, Rick's trusting her more than anyone. But right after Rick and Carol end up talking, Jerry ends up sending a message to Rick. And it looks like the message was from Jesus to tell Rick that Maggie's on her way to Alexandria. So Rick tries to make a relay call in Alexandria saying not to let Maggie in. But it looks like somebody sabotaged the relay as Oceanside's the only one hearing it. And that's where Daryl ends up coming up to Rick saying that he'll take him to Alexandria on his bike. That's weird. And of course they end up passing the place, so Rick tells him to stop now. Where we get this little moment that Rick and Daryl look like Rick and Shane back in season 2. So Rick ends up asking what this is, and Daryl tells him that he sabotaged the relay and that Maggie has to do this. So they end up fighting until they run into a strange digged out hole that Daryl didn't do. But now the fun's gonna start as them trying to get out. While since Rick ain't home, Michonne has to feed Negan, and Negan says he ain't eating unless she talks to him. So he's got 20 minutes. And as we go back to Rick and Daryl, Rick explains that they don't know how important Negan is to them, but Daryl knows that it's more important to Maggie. And Daryl ends up telling Rick about how Oceanside killed those Saviors. And that's where Daryl says that having Negan in a cell shows a symbol for all his people that he's going to get out. But Rick's shown that that's not the reason that they're keeping him. They're keeping him in there until he dies. And that's where Rick says if they keep killing, that everything that Carl did was for nothing. And that the war wasn't nothing either. But Daryl says the truth is that he wants all of them to have faith in the Saviors, but he doesn't have any faith for his own people. Wow. While Negan's just saying personal things to Michonne, but he ends up asking where the bat is, and Michonne says she doesn't know, which kills him. Speaking of killing, looks like Jadis has got Gabriel. And you remember that technique she's gonna do to Negan? Well, now she's gonna do with him. Well, actually, instead she ends up knocking him out. But as Carol and them are going back to the kingdom, it looks like the Saviors figured out that Oceanside did kill some of them. So shots start popping off. And we got 2 hordes that they need to track different ways, so if they don't get out now, it's gonna be a big problem. While we finally get to see kinda what Negan looks like. But bad for Rick and Daryl, some of the hordes are starting to drop in the hole. So Rick ends up climbing up the route, which you know isn't as easy as it was back in the years. But he does get up and ends up getting Daryl grabbing his hand. Now in my opinion, when Rick says take my hand, I think this is a straight referral of when Daryl was hallucinating thinking that Merle said to take Rick's hand, which was literally talked about in season 2. Could just be me. But Daryl says that him and Rick need to go now, but Rick says he has to solve the bridge. So he tells Daryl to get back home as he leads the walkers a different way. And that's where Daryl tells him to be safe, and Rick says you too. And it looks like Gabriel ended up getting a note from Jadis as she said she already went away. I wonder if she found those helicopter people. But as Rick's riding his horse taking all the walkers, he looks the other way to see, unfortunately, the other hordes right in his face. Yes, they're about to merge and the horse is freaking out. So the horse kicks him off onto a spike. So hopefully Rick can get the spike out of him. Because if not, he's going to be food to these walkers. No, they cannot do this to Rick. And we're back with episode 5 and Rick's hallucinations. And by hallucinating, I mean he's literally seeing himself in his hospital bed. And no, the story's not going to be that it's been in Rick's head the whole time and he's been in a coma. Instead, his former self tells me he got to wake up and get off this spike. So he does end up pulling himself out with a lot of pain. But he does successfully get off of it as he's bleeding out and trying to get on the horse. So now all he's gotta do is stay conscious and get this herd where it needs to go. And Jadis doesn't have anywhere else to go, so she ends up calling the helicopter people saying that she's got an A. But in reality, it looks like she's gonna try to take one of the helicopters. So she tells the coordinates to meet. While Rick is not doing too well. Oh yeah, and don't forget that Maggie's still on her way to Alexandria. But Rick gets in front of the horde as he's gotta take a break for a minute. So he can bandage himself up and pass out. And then he wakes up with a bunch of walkers behind him, just like Georgia and Atlanta at the beginning. But this time he drives over to see his best friend in the car. And it's Shane. Yeah, remember those first minutes when they were eating on burgers? Looks like this is that moment. And they get to share a good couple conversations, while Rick says that he's sorry that he killed him. And honestly, I really wish these two got to stay alive together. But Shane says that he did stand up for these people, so now he's got to get up. And as he's about to scream at him, he turns into a walker, so Rick ends up tackling him down. And it looks like it's time for him to get out of there because he can't get the horse now. While Judith and Michonne are just chilling at Alexandria. I swear she's grown so fast. While Maggie makes it to Alexandria, Michonne makes sure to stop her. But as they argue, we do get a time lapse of figuring out how long it's been. And it looks like it's been 1 year and 6 months since the war. And that's where Maggie explains if Rick was the one that died, that Michonne would have killed him too. So after hearing all what Maggie ends up saying, she does give him the keys and just lets her walk in. But as Maggie comes in there, she says she's got one thing to do and tells him to get on his knees so she can kill him. So he keeps antagonizing her so she will kill him. But we figure out in reality that he just wants to die because he misses his wife and his wife's all he's got. So Maggie tells him to get back in his prison cell because seeing him like this is even better than him being dead. While Rick is trying his hardest to stay up but ends up falling unconscious on the horse. And that's where we get a good scene with him and Herschel. And sad news about Herschel's actual actor, he did die a couple years ago, and rest in peace for him. I loved him. And it looks like so did Rick, as he tells Herschel that he's sorry he got all of them killed. And Rick says he wants to see his family, but Herschel says he can't, and that he needs to wake up now. Yes, Rick, you still got a job to do. But then we see Rick walking through the hospital as he gets to the don't open dead inside door. And instead of the first time that he walked through not opening the door, he opens it up to see rows and rows and rows of all the dead people and people he knows now dead in here. Like, there ain't no way this is how many people died. But Sasha gets up and tells Rick that he's got a job to do. Even if it does risk his life, it's for his people. Because that's what she did. But she tells him he's got to wake up. So as Rick's trying to run on foot, he actually does make it to the bridge. But that's when Alexandria and all of them end up coming in to save Rick. But the even sadder part about it is, it's not even actually happening. And the walkers are still coming. So Rick tries to see if the bridge will hold as the walkers come through it. Which it actually does, as Rick ends up seeing Daryl and all the others from a far distance. Even Daryl saving his life. But it looks like Daryl and Michonne are too late. Because since the walkers are on their way to Hilltop, Rick can't let that happen. So since he sees dynamite, he aims his gun out. And Rick's last words are, "I found them," which is referencing when Morgan said to find his family. Because keep in reminder, all of Rick's family's dead. So there it goes. There goes our main character. And you know when Daryl starts crying, stuff's getting serious. Like, Rick's led their team for years. So everyone just has to leave. But as Jadis is about to meet the coordinates of the helicopter to try to hijack it, she ends up seeing a bunch of burnt walkers from the bridge. But she sees a faraway body. Can it be? It's Rick. And he's not dead. And Jadis's people, the helicopter people, end up showing up. And she says she doesn't have an A, that she has a B. So she asks if they'll help him, and they say yes. And as Rick's slowly waking up, it looks like the helicopter people and Jadis are gonna help him. But we won't see Rick until his TV show comes out. But as we get our last minutes of Rick, ends up playing the song from the first episode. And just like that, there goes Rick. And with Rick being gone, it looks like even more time has passed. And we end up seeing new survivors, as this girl's named Magna, her other friend's named Luke, this is Kelly, along with her sister Connie, and Yumiko. And it looks like they do all know how to survive, but one of them's injured. And as they get surrounded, we end up hearing a familiar gun. Yeah, Rick's pistol, as this girl ends up asking all their names. They ask the little girl what's her name. And apparently that's Judith Grimes. Yeah, we got a time change. And we're back with episode 6, and instead of it being Rick, it's Michonne. and we figure out that our time change is 6 years later. So with all the time we've been with our group, it's probably about 11 or 12 years. But everyone's been spread out, including Daryl. He stays by himself now. But in my opinion, I think he's just out there trying to look for Rick. But even though it's been 6 years, our 3 colonies actually haven't seen each other. They all stay at home. We see that Carol's grown her hair out, while Michonne's on a search one day ends up finding a little doll, or more of a toy figure that looks kind of like Rick. But at first I thought it was just Michonne talking, but it is actually her talking to herself. But it seems like she was trying to talk to Rick as she was sitting beside the bridge. Well, we cut back to the new group actually running into Aaron and Eugene. And we see that Aaron's got a metal arm now. But for some odd reason, now our group doesn't actually take people in. While we see that Connie, the one with longer hair, actually does sign language because she's deaf. But Judith says she saved them, so they're going to come back and we're going to figure out what's going on. And at the kingdom, looks like Jerry's doing good. He's always important. But they're having some water issues as it keeps breaking. And apparently Henry is a lot older, while all the others finally make it to Alexandria. Which I'm not going to lie, it looks amazing now. But as Michonne gets in, she ends up taking a quick look at all the new guests. And even Aaron says this time that they should actually try to take these people in. So apparently in the span of these 6 years, something's either happened or they just do this because of the saviors. But at Alexandria, we see that we got leaders now. And they're going to vote on if these new people can be on their team or not. And at first they all act silent and act like they haven't done too much things that's bad. Which I'm not going to lie, these people don't see bad. But it seems like Michonne knows something as she walked in, her hand tattoo, which is basically 4 dots and a dot inside, symbolizing that she's been in prison. And she also tells her to take out the knife because she already knows it's in there. Like how? She literally has a belt knife. But Aaron says they should probably still stay, but Michonne just says that they could do the choice themselves. While it looks like Gabriel's moved on from Jadis. While back at home, looks like Judith is still noticing that her mom's talking to Rick by herself. And even sometimes Carl, and that can really scare a kid. But it looks like Carol and Henry are actually on their way to the other 3 colonies as they're going to have a fair since nobody's seen each other in 6 years. But as they're on their way, Henry ends up hearing somebody screaming, so he goes to try to help. And of course it ends up being some of the saviors. Oh, and even worse, it's that dude Mud. And he basically explains how the saviors' place fell, and they're going to be taking everything that Carol's got. While Eugene's got this electric box, and they're going to put it on top of one of the water towers so they can talk from farther distances with the walkie-talkies. So yeah, that's where him and Rosita are going. And not only did Mud take all their stuff, he actually took the King Ezekiel's ring that Carol had. And it looks like Judith goes to Negan for homework help, which you can tell he's way happier. Only because now he has Judith, he can actually have someone to talk to. While Eugene does get on a water tower high up in the air so he can connect it. So he ends up turning it on and it seems like it's working. But as Eugene looks over, for some odd reason, a random horde pops up. Like, I don't understand. When you see a horde, you end up actually hearing them, but they're here. So Rosita tells Eugene they gotta go now. But you better watch your step there, buddy. But as he's going down, he ends up kicking the ladder down that he put there. So Eugene falls off and probably sprains his leg. So him and Rosita get going. While it looks like Carol and Henry are almost on the way to one of the colonies. And it looks like Michonne and all the others didn't agree for them to stay here. So at first this girl wants to take it over, but Luke and all the others say no and to give her that necklace that has the knife with it. And that there's kids here and there's good people here and they're going to respect this place. And in the middle of the night, Carol goes over to Mud and tells her that she got her ring back. And it's time for her to deal with the rest of them. And she burns and kills all of them. While the lady goes Michonne and gives her the knife and says she's sorry. And next day when Carol and Henry are on their way, they end up seeing another survivor, Daryl. And they ask him if he wants a ride. While all the new survivors are about to go their way. But Michonne comes out of nowhere and tells the survivors that they're going to take them to Hilltop. So actually Judith did help them. They're going to actually have a place to stay. While here's when stuff gets serious. Eugene's leg is too hurt, so Rosita and him have to go hide in mud from the walkers. But as they're sitting here, you can kind of hear walkers whispering. As they're saying, where are they? And that we need to find them. Wait, I know walkers don't talk. And we're back with episode 7, starting back with Rosita. So right now she's still running from a herd that's whispering to her. But as she looks around, we don't see Eugene, we just keep hearing whispers. And since she's hurt, she ends up falling down and passing out. While Carol sees that Daryl's, making his house anywhere he goes. And he's also got a dog, and the best part about it is his name is Dog. But that's not why she's here for Daryl. She's going to Hilltop to make Henry a blacksmith and wants Daryl to stay. While Michonne and Sadiq are taking her newcomers to Hilltop. Even if they all want their weapons. And what's cool about their group is since Connie's death, they all know sign language, which really helps them out, so others don't know what they're saying. And this is our first time seeing Hilltop, and my goodness, they've been growing. But as you can see, everybody's got a job. And instead of the president being Maggie, it's actually Jesus now. Because we'll figure out later that Maggie's left with Georgie. But I'm not going to lie, having this much time with Jesus on the screen is weird. And that's where newcomers actually figure out that Michonne's taking them to Hilltop, but she isn't going, but Sadiq is. So they say since Michonne's not going, they want their weapons. So Michonne says that they have the choice to either get their weapons and leave, or they keep their weapons and they go to Hilltop. So the new team chooses to let them keep their weapons. While Aaron and Jesus have been practicing, and I actually figured out that Aaron's actually part of Alexandria. So remember, none of the colonies have actually talked to each other. Jesus and Aaron aren't supposed to be. So in reality, they're the only ones that know about each other's colony. And if Michonne knew that Aaron was out here, he'd probably get in trouble for the rules. But as they're talking, they end up hearing screaming. Because it ends up being Rosita. But the only thing she gets to say is that she left Eugene at a barn. And she passes out, and it's not safe out here, so they're going to take Rosita back. While Daryl and all them end up enjoying a nice lunch. But keeping a reminder, since Michonne and them have to get to Hilltop, they have to take the long way since the bridge ain't there. And she ends up hearing that Luke's messing around with something. So he picks it up as Michonne tells him to put it down. He turns around, she slices it. And we figure out that it wasn't a weapon, it was actually a ukulele. Come on now, Michonne. And back with Carol and Henry, it looks like they're trying to sleep, but Henry can't. Which we see that Daryl's stuck in a pickle as a bunch of walkers trying to take him down because he's trying to save Dog. But Henry ends up helping them take him out, and they save Dog. But as they walk away, it looks like Carol would have took care of it if she needed to. While Henry thanks Daryl. I don't know why, but I think he sounds so much like Tom Holland. So after Michonne and all them check the place out to see that it's safe, they're just going to stay the night in this building as Sadiq and Luke actually get to know each other. Because they both love instruments. And in my opinion, the new squad's pretty cool. But as the next day hits, it seems like Michonne's still not going to Hilltop, even though Sadiq tells her that Maggie's not there. Yeah, Sadiq knows about it too. Maggie took Herschel and they went somewhere far away with Georgie. But now it's time to get out of the building as they get on their way to Hilltop. And the new squad definitely know how to take out walkers and are really experienced in slingshots and arrows. But somehow they end up fighting the same horde they were earlier and find the friend they lost to the walkers. And it's not honestly sad to us since we don't know the squad as much. But imagine if that was one of our main characters like that. It'd be sad too. But as Michonne's about to turn around and go to Alexandria, Sadiq says she needs to go to Hilltop. But apparently some of the Hilltop people come out to warn Michonne, as Rosita showed up at the Hilltop's walls really injured. So it looks like Michonne's going if she likes her or not. But back at Hilltop, seems like everybody's getting to see each other since Carol's finally showing up. And Jesus gets to meet everyone. And even Daryl and Aaron get to speak. And that's when Aaron ends up explaining that Rosita's in an infirmary. And that Eugene's still out there, so they need help tracking him. So since Daryl's gonna help, looks like Aaron is too. And Tara was gonna go help, but Jesus says he's going instead. So hopefully her team can find Eugene and figure out what's going on. And we're back with the mid-season finale. So as we're looking at this herd, it looks like Daryl and Aaron and them are getting closer to where Eugene was. But look how these zombies are migrating. They've never done this before. So Daryl tells them that there's a storm coming and they gotta hurry. And at first I really didn't think anything was going on until this walker slowly turns his head. And while Michonne's out, it looks like Gabriel ends up talking to Negan even though he gets under his skin. But the same Hilltop people that came to warn Michonne are here to tell Gabriel about what happened to Rosita. While when Michonne and them get to the doors, it doesn't seem like anyone's too happy to see them. And that's because they really aren't. Instead of letting Michonne and all of them come in, they're gonna have to put their guns down. And Michonne explains that the only reason she's here is because of Rosita. And so this new team can join them. Well, we can see something definitely happen between these three colonies. But Michonne does get to see Carol, because she tells Michonne she tried to come up here and tell everybody that they need to go to the fair at the kingdom. And that's where Michonne says no, she's not going to the fair and that the three colonies needed to remain the three colonies. Therefore meaning that none of them collide. while somehow Daryl and them are still getting chased by the walkers and it's about to pour down raining. So now they're looking for some shelter, while Carol's on her way back home and Henry's staying to be a blacksmith. But that horde that's following Daryl and them is even getting bigger, doubling in the size that they seen him in earlier. While Henry ends up seeing Enid trying to come up to her and, trying to make his move, until he figures out someone already has. But as Negan tries to press Gabriel's buttons, this time he's not dealing with it since Rosie is hurt, so he just leaves. While Henry's just staying to himself as he just eats by himself, but it looks like he can make some friends his age. While Siddiq and Michonne sit and wait till Rosita wakes up. She does wake up and freaks out and asks where Eugene is, and that's where Michonne tells her that everything's fine and Daryl and them are looking for him. But Rosita's trying to hurry to help because they don't know what they're dealing with. So something big is going on. And as the storm's getting closer and the day is getting darker, our team is still moving, but they end up finding the barn. And lucky enough for them, it looks like Eugene's still there. But they figure out that the horde is still following them. But that's where Eugene ends up telling them that the horde's been following them 3 different times. And that they're not normal walkers as they've been whispering and figuring out where he's been. While Henry's spending the time he could be learning getting drunk. Kids never change. But they do go outside of the walls to mess with this zombie in the hole, but Henry ends up taking it out. So the other kids leave him there as he's going to get in trouble since Hilltop has a curfew of not being outside at night. While this horde is getting even huger, still following them. But Daryl's got a plan as they're going to go a different way as he tries to keep the horde from them. And back with Negan, we see he keeps throwing this tennis ball, but it goes past his gate. While Henry got caught outside of the gate and drunk. So if he don't get his crap back together, he's going back to the kingdom. While Daryl and Dog literally use firecrackers to try to get the walkers' attention. And they still follow Jesus and the others. Wait, what? No, I swear walkers are attracted to sound. But it looks like as Jesus and the others have to pass this gate, they're gonna have to fight some of these walkers off in the fog. Which they're doing perfectly fine. Doesn't seem like these walkers are smarter. But since Eugene's sitting there waiting for their help, Michonne and some of the newcomers end up helping her get them out of the gate. Since they're on the other side. So Jesus tells Aaron to go help them, while he's gonna fight the walkers off. But as he's taking all of them out, he tries to fight this one and it turns and kills him. And yes, the walker does whisper to him. And more of them end up running out of nowhere with knives. But Daryl and Michonne and all of them end up killing him. And wherever the walker hit him, Jesus did die. But even when Michonne goes to look at the blood on her sword, it looks brand new. So Daryl goes to skin one of the walker's faces off to see that it's a mask and that these are actually real people. And all we can hear is more walkers coming. But we also hear the whispers, but we'll figure out about that next video.